Hi, my name is Harry.
Hi, and I'm Abin Bosnet.
Okay, what shall we discuss today?
So today I think we're going to be discussing about IELTS and PTE.
Okay, so what differences have you noticed between IELTS and PTE?
Well, there are many different differences when it comes to IELTS and PTE. I think the first one is definitely the test time. The IELTS test takes around 2 hours and 45 minutes, whereas PTE only takes 2 hours of exam. The IELTS test has two provisions. The first one is computer delivered IELTS test, which is also 2 hours and 45 minutes worth of exam, and paper-based IELTS test, which is also the same. However, PTE is 2 hours based exam, and it is actually interconnected with one another when it comes to scoring. So one of the main differences would definitely be that PTE is completely computer based. You don't have any other options to give PTE, while IELTS is optional. You can have both digital IELTS or basically your paper delivered IELTS test.
Okay. So you mean that IELTS lasts for 2 hours 45 minutes, you mean? So PT is about 2 hours, right? So PT has no option but you have to do on computer itself, right? So IELTS has got, let's say, computer-based tests and paper pencil-based tests. So as an instructor of IELTS and PTE, what do you suggest taking PTE or IELTS with test takers?
Oh, well, that's a good question because I actually think that it depends from a student to another student. I don't particularly specify out the preferences for IELTS or PT. I definitely outline the fact about the differences between IELTS and PTE at first, and with respect to the students' academic background, the way that they grew up, the kinds of learning of English language that they had in the past would definitely be a determining factor to which test would they seek for. And besides, it's very popular that students love taking PTE tests for Australia and Canada these days, while IELTS is a bit more global. Even if you want to apply for Canada, America, or even Australia, it's pretty much comfortable if you take your IELTS test.
Okay, so that means PTE can be taken by the test takers, or IELTS they can take either test if they like to go to foreign world, especially in English-speaking countries like the US or UK or Canada or Australia. So, as let's say as a tutor, for example, how do you say that PTE is different from IELTS, as you mentioned before? But PT is also proficiency test, and IELTS is also English language proficiency test. But how can we, persuade or convince or tell the students or test takers to take this or test or that test one over another?
Right, so what I actually do is, with respect to the student, I let them decide first. For example, if a student comes up who has a decent academic background with good delivery of English, I would definitely recommend them a bit more towards IELTS test or PT test. It's actually optional. The students who have actually had good training experiences would definitely do good in both. But I would say that IELTS, besides IELTS, PT would definitely be a bit more compatible for students who specifically come from a bit more technical, like aspect, probably using computers for a while. Students who love utilizing computers for their test, they would definitely feel more preference, right? I would also figure out if a student is comfortable in front of an examiner or not, because in IELTS exam, you need to go to the interviewer on a specific date and give your speaking test, which happens directly face-to-face with an examiner, which is actually scary for a lot of students. But PT is actually a bit more comfortable because they don't have to face any kinds of instructors. Everything from scoring to testing is done by AI. So I would say that it would definitely depend on the kind of students that we have, but it also depends on what kind of preferences they would definitely love to take.
So you mean that the test takers can go for both IELTS or PTE?
Right.
So it depends upon their interest, or let's say, in a sense, ability to deal with, let's say, the question times as well. But PTE mostly is less, focuses on, very specific question type, and they have to do within a very certain time, very limited time. I mean to say. For example, they have to finish the question 1 question or 2 question within a couple of seconds as well sometimes. So how do you think that those students who are not familiar with computer and the technology can deal with these kind of questions?
So I believe that the PT questions, as you mentioned, are pretty much life skills based. For example, if a student I would say it's a real-time simulation of what will happen when they go to a university, right? The fast-paced ability to take notes, take lectures, the fast-paced ability to describe something that is in front of them, to take lectures. So I would say that a student, if he does not have a good technical background, who has a hard time learning or understanding computer, would definitely have some hard time when it comes to choosing the test. But if they actually practice well enough, it takes somewhere around 2 months to be good at something that you're practicing enough. So if a student actually takes somewhere around 2 to 3 hours of their day to practice your PTE's basic questions, I believe that it will be compatible for them, even if they had a hard time or even if they have no knowledge of using any kinds of computers.
So it is saying that those test takers who are opting for PT should not be hardworking, they should play smart. Do you agree with that?
Well, it actually, likewise, I think it's a very optimistic approach, thinking that IELTS, besides IELTS, PT delivers some kinds of aspects that IELTS does not deliver. There have been a lot of different situations where students actually love using templates to figure out answers for their PTE questions, and it's actually comical, but at the same time, I believe that students are taking some, smart input to make sure that they can go through the computer test. For example, there are pretty much a lot of different kinds of questions that are scored by AI. The whole PT test is scored by AI. Since no humans are involved, they always have a standard-based algorithm that is used to check a student's scores or what they deliver in the scores. So having that in mind, students actually follow templates that have been used a lot, which actually falls in the PT algorithm and ultimately gives them score. So I would say that's one of the pretty smart moves by students. I have to give them that.
Okay, so don't you think that they're compulsion to follow some templates? So sometimes they can't answer the question easily within the given time frame. For example, if you have to talk about describe emails question type, their students can't describe the emails, for example, in 40 seconds, and they certainly need to go for a template. Do you think that's a good? That makes a sense?
Well, I believe that it makes sense in a short term, scenario where they just think about completing the test. But I believe that PT is not just about giving the test, but I think it's more about dealing with real-time scenarios that come after once they're in the university or once they're in the college that they're going to, probably in America, Australia, or Canada. Well, what happens is PTE's test is optimized in a way that they have a comfortable time in a university, especially when it comes to taking notes, using basic communication skills. All of these skills are relatively there in your PTE questions, but using templates might be a short-term solution towards getting the scores there, but there are real-time scenarios where you might need to explain something that is in front of you, and in those times I don't believe that templates can be helpful at all.
Okay, fine. So that means that we can't use any way to get through the test. That is another part, and when you have to involve in real-time test or real situation, I mean to say that we need to anyway face the situation and deal with the situation in the same way. Right, so what about IELTS then? So what do you tell the test takers about IELTS? So what do you think about it?
Right, so there's always a form of preliminary test that all examiners or all instructors take for their students. These preliminary tests with relation to grammar, understanding context, and the passages, these can actually help us to maneuver what kind of student might prefer which test or which kind of test can they be comfortable in. So IELTS is actually independent when it comes to scores. The reading section, writing section, listening and speaking section, they're all individual sections, and none of these sections actually give scores for one another, which is completely different in PT because you have inter scores where one of the aspects of your PT questions can actually give you scores for another aspect of your PT test. Take an example of retail lecture, where you actually get scores for your listening test as well as your speaking test. So with that in mind, I believe that students who take preliminary tests can definitely, we can definitely understand what kind of background they come from and whether they're comfortable taking the IELTS or not. Although I believe that both of the tests are equally difficult when it comes to reading section, I don't believe that there's a, like, I would definitely be on the fence if a student would find it comfortable time and again to do reading section in IELTS and then have difficulties in PTE.
Okay, so as a whole, we can say that both tests test the proficiency level, English proficiency level, test takers.
Right.
So test takers can go for either option. You mean this?
Right.
So yes. So you mean that we can go for both tests, but it depends upon the ability, in one sense,
Right.
or on the other hand, their preference as well, right?
Right.
That determine the decision to take either this test or that.
Right, definitely. So there are many determining factors involved when it comes to taking IELTS or PTE. It can either be their like academic background, especially in English. If they come from a college or institution where the major language of instruction was always English, it's definitely going to be comfortable for them. But if they are from let's say from a background which did not focus on English at like a very preliminary stages of their life, it would definitely be difficult for them to give both tests, regardless of it being IELTS or PTE.
Okay, so what you can conclude that then? So we conclude that we can go for PTE or IELTS, right? Because they test the level of
Proficiency.
proficiency.
They both are proficiency tests. They
Tests.
both are there to help you to like to understand the real-time scenarios or make sure that your English proficiency test is good before you actually apply there. Because every universities have their own sets of requirements when it comes to IELTS and PTE. They need to get a minimalistic scores as it is required in their universities or colleges. And yeah, it would definitely depend upon a person's personal preferences or the kinds of background that they come from. I would say that's a lot of, with my students, I believe that majority of my students who are really into computer science love taking PTE tests. That's pretty much compatible for them. Students who are generally from, have been doing reading a lot, for example, the avid novel readers that we have, a lot of, students who love reading books, novels, magazines, newspapers, they definitely have preference or comfortable time doing their reading tests in IELTS. So I guess it depends.
So it also depends upon the requirement of the universities as well, right?
Right.
So they can go for both tests, but they need to first decide which score is required by what universities or institution they're going to get admission to.
Right. So the last thing I would say is PTE test and IELTS test. They're definitely not completely different. They're actually the same. They deliver the same thing. They both have their own aspects, and it would definitely depend from one student to another and their own preferences on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.